Today, we become legends.
Hey, my name's Inter, and welcome back to the channel for another update video, this time for Smite 2. So first up, 24/7 closed alpha is going to be coming on August 27th, as you can see here. That was pushed back from they sort of wanted to do end of July for like a 24/7 closed beta release. They're kind of shifting things around now. They're going to do a 24/7 closed alpha, which they originally were not going to do. They were going to call that closed beta, but instead they're going to leave it in alpha for a bit longer, but still be 24/7 before they move into a closed beta phase, which essentially they'll be giving out more keys at that point. And so they've released this blog post. There's a roadmap in here. They go over a lot of the stuff about like how they're changing things based on player feedback, what they're going to do going forward with the game. And we've also got a YouTube video here as well to go over, so we'll do that first. We'll go over the blog post afterwards.
I'm excited to let you know that on August 27th, Smite 2 will enter 24/7 closed alpha. This is the next step of our alpha process. And as you've noticed, it's about a month later than the date that we had listed on storefronts previously. We wanted to take this extra time to address your feedback. Please take a look at smite2.com for a full blog going into each of these points of feedback we heard and how we've already addressed them for the next alpha weekend and how we're going to address them even more going forward. This is just the next step in the process. We're going to keep growing from here. We're going to have a 24/7 beta later this year. We're going to go into free to play, hopefully 2025. But the most important part of this process is that we're building the game alongside you. We want your feedback. That's why we're going into this 24/7 phase. We want to see how you feel about some new systems that we're introducing, like ranked, like God progression. We want to see how that feels when you're playing it for more than just a day or two at a time. Because we want to make Smite 2 a game that you can play for thousands of hours, just like Smite 1 was. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. Please check out the blog on smite2.com, and we'll see you on the battleground of the gods.
So yeah, we will be going to check out that blog, but there you go, it's just a quick like update version, the cliff notes essentially. And yeah, the plan is to go into 24/7 closed beta on August 27th, and then go in, closed alpha on August 27th, and then go into closed beta a little bit later this year. And then hopefully sometime in 2025, I would imagine probably late 2025, they want to go into full free-to-play open beta. And at that point, the game is pretty much released. You know, when it goes full free-to-play open beta, anyone can join whenever they want. The game is practically released at that point. It just doesn't have a 1.0 label. But yeah, let's dive into this blog post. There's a ton of stuff here about how they're addressing feedback, new things that they're bringing, the roadmap for how they want to release the game, and all that kind of stuff. So let's just jump in. So we'll go over the TLDR here for those of you that don't want to watch the entire thing. It's quite a long blog post, so I imagine this will be a fairly long video, but I do want to go over it all in detail for those that want it. I'm interested in it, and I'm sure a lot of you watching are interested in the full details of what's going on with the game. But we'll go over the TLDR here for those that aren't interested in like a full, like probably 30-minute video that this will be. So Smite 2's 24/7 alpha will start on August 27th. We know that already. We just discussed that. Our initial soft target for the 24/7 alpha was late July, as you may have seen in some storefronts, like on console and stuff, but we will be taking the extra time to address some community feedback before entering 24/7. So of course this is good to see. We've been providing a ton of feedback. I have been as well. I've been relatively critical of Smite 2 lately because I just do not think it's ready. And so it's nice to see that they are taking our feedback into account. They are delaying the release of it ever so slightly. You provided a ton of great feedback already, and the team has been hard at work interpreting and integrating this. You should notice many improvements in the next alpha weekend. That will be launching, I believe, Thursday this week. So that should be fun. Read on exactly how we are addressing the major points of community feedback, and a lot more is coming during July and August. The game will still be in an alpha state, but we will need to start 24/7 testing so we can more thoroughly test and iterate systems such as player progression and ranked. So yeah, two very important things that are not in Smite 2 in any fashion at the moment. I think player progression is going to be a massive one, especially when it's now going to be in 24/7 relatively soon. I think by the time the game goes 24/7, you need that stuff there. Otherwise, people are just going to hop on for like, you know, 1 or 2 games after the game gets updated and new stuff is in there, and then they're just going to go back and play Smite 1. I think having some kind of progression there, it sounds a little bit vapid, but trust me, like people being able to earn these worshippers, level up their account, all this kind of stuff, it is important. It will bring people back to the game, and it'll get people there playing, you know, 6-7 games a night for the entire week rather than just playing a couple of games, testing out what the new content is, and then going back to Smite 1. Ranked is much the same. You know, I don't think the game is particularly ready for ranked, but I don't think that'll really be an issue because ranked, I assume, will be hard reset by the time the game launches. Probably by the time we go into closed beta, it'll get reset. It'll probably get reset in open beta again, and it might even get reset, like a hard reset, by the time the game releases as well. So it won't really be that big of an issue, but ranked will be nice as well for those players that want to grind up and, you know, prove themselves the best at Smite 2. 24/7 testing is also necessary so we can identify and address any issues that arise from long-term play so that Smite 2 is enjoyable to play for thousands of hours, as we know Smite 1 is. We still expect to launch a 24/7 closed beta later in 2024 and a free-to-play open beta sometime in 2025. A key difference between the closed alpha and closed beta is that keys will be given out more generously for the closed beta, and the game will have more features targeted at a new user onboarding experience at that time. So yeah, this 24/7 closed alpha is essentially what the 24/7 closed beta beta was going to be. They're just going to be a little bit more stingy with giving out keys and a little bit less on the new user onboarding experience kind of stuff. This is just the next step in Smite 2's iterative, community-driven development process. We need your feedback so we can keep working to make the game great. So there you go, there's a TLDR on like some of the timelines when this stuff's going to be coming, but there's a lot more detail down in this post. So we talked about 24/7 alpha. Smite 2 alpha isn't for marketing, it's to get your feedback. Your feedback is crucial, though we appreciate the people who say stop complaining it's an alpha. We want you to complain when something doesn't feel right. That's the point of our alpha. Yeah, of course, as I said earlier in this video, I've been pretty critical of Smite 2 lately. Definitely worth providing your feedback to them. We all want this to be a great game. I'm not shitting on it because I want it to fail. I definitely don't want it to fail. I want it to succeed, and therefore I'm giving my truly honest feedback a lot of the time and just kind of throwing things out there. Don't assume we know an issue is there because it may be specific to your setup or style of play. We probably do know about most of these issues already, but for every 20 issues we are aware of, there is one that is new and incredibly valuable to hear about. So yeah, basically, when you participate in the alphas, make sure you give them their feedback. Why the push to 24/7 so soon? We are embracing a true early access development mindset. We want to see you play, we want your feedback, and we want the game to be better with every update. Developing alone in a box doesn't make games as great as they can be with the community deeply involved. Yeah, with this kind of game especially, you really do need sort of the community involvement as you're developing it. Even when we enter 24/7, we will still be labeling the game as in an alpha. It will be listed as early access on Steam and game preview on Xbox. If PlayStation had a similar program, we would have a similar tag there. I don't know if that means it's not going to be available on PlayStation. Maybe some PS5 gamers can leave the comments down below. I don't know what that's going to be like. The main way to gain access during 24/7 will continue to be purchasing a Founders Edition, though we will also send out keys on some platforms. We very intentionally want to get access at this point in time as the game is not a finished product. It will be a better experience for early adopters who want to support the development, help shape the direction of Smite 2, and know what they're getting into. Because of this focus, new player onboarding will be very minimal. This will arrive when we hit free to play, which is when we hope that to really grow the Smite 2 player base. So I understand where they're coming from with this, but I do think they should get a lot of this stuff in there sooner rather than later. I think by the time it hits like closed beta, you might want some of this stuff in there. Like, sure, you're not going to get the massive influx of players from when it goes free to play and fully launches and all that kind of stuff, but I think by the time you're in closed beta, you might want some of this stuff there. I don't know, maybe it's not necessary. It depends on sort of like the demographics of who's playing the game at the moment, but from my experience in Smite 2, I have seen a lot of people that are clearly not very experienced or might have been entirely new to Smite playing in the alpha. Granted, those type of players probably aren't the target audience for the alpha. They're probably going to get a bad taste in their mouth from the game at this point. But yeah, I have seen a lot of that, so maybe getting this stuff in sooner rather than later will be best. So moving on to some of the specific things that they've talked about in this blog post in terms of like how they're going to be improving the game, what our complaints of it have been. So God gameplay is slow, sluggish, and unresponsive. Smite 2 is a third-person action MOBA. We do not intend to introduce sluggishness or clunk in an attempt to slow down the game. Smite is at its most fun when characters feel fluid, responsive, and clear in their actions. In each test so far, we have found small aspects of the game that we need to tweak and improve. Some are micro things we initially missed bringing over from Smite 1. Some are lessons we had to relearn, while others still are how to best utilize the new tools at our disposal to push the feel of the game. Some recent examples: there was an issue with moving while strafing or turn juking, which slowed you down drastically. This has been resolved to better match Smite 1's movement. Aim sensitivity did not properly account for field of view scaling like it did in Smite 1. This created a totally different feel. Yeah, there were some weird issues with like sensitivity not feeling right, so this is probably a large part of it. Anher's animations for Pillar and Impale felt slow, even though the timings were identical to Smite 1. We adjusted the animations and when AFX appear to better match the intended feel. Additionally, when we used his projectiles as a test to address an overall feeling of projectiles feeling slow, even though we confirmed the speeds matched between Smite 1 and Smite 2. Try him out in Alpha Weekend 3 and see how we did. We'd love your feedback. So yeah, seems like some big changes going to be coming to Anher in Alpha Weekend 3. I think Anher already felt fairly decent, but yeah, he did feel a little bit slow. It sometimes felt like the FX didn't match up. It sometimes felt like he had either longer pre-fire or longer post-fire on some of his abilities. Just general stuff like that. I think pre-fire and post-fire is a big thing that they haven't specifically mentioned here, I don't think. But yeah, it's very important to keep those pre-fire and post-fire times relatively low, ideally, especially post-fire times. Gods feel really bad when they have extremely long post-fire times on their abilities when they can't act after they've cast them. Like, the animation is completely done, but then for like, you know, 0.2, 0.3 seconds, they're just locked in. That feels especially bad, and I feel like a lot of that is actually present in Smite 2 at the moment. Moving on though, Conquest gameplay pacing is slow. Our two main focuses over the upcoming alphas are ensuring there is enough to do on the map and strategize over at each phase of the game. There is currently a distinct lull in the game as it transitions from early to mid game. Ensuring teams can progress towards ending a match, closing out games as builds approach full. Currently games can stalemate well past full build, and it can be difficult to get that game ending team fight. So yeah, I completely agree with both of these points. I think there needs to be more. I've been saying this for a long time and I don't think they're listening, but I think there should be something to do in the side jungles other than just like gold piles. Personally, Personally, to me, I think the gold piles are super uninspired. They should be replaced with something more interesting. Maybe they're placeholder, I'm not entirely sure. But my personal change that I would make here is remove the teleporters. I think they're annoying. I think they're bad for the game. And replace those with some kind of a camp. You know, you can have a contestable one where the gold pile is, and then maybe a safe camp for each side lane as well. I think that will give you a lot more to fight over during the laning phase, and maybe not so in the mid game, because in the mid game you kind of try to group up a little bit more, and you don't necessarily want to be sticking to the sides of the map, especially if teleporters aren't available anymore. But yeah, some more interesting stuff to do, some more unique camps with cool effects and stuff like that to sort of spice up the early to mid game. And then in terms of the late game stuff, this is generally like there's just not a whole lot to do after your full build in Smite 2. Like, not only do you not have to repeatedly spend 3k on 3k pots because you just buy them and they're permanent, even when you die, they don't have a timer or anything like that. There's also no level 20 starter items like there are in Smite 1, and those provide a really strong power spike to allow you to kind of close out the game. You know, once you hit that level 20 point, it's a real big power spike when you get those items online, because Smite 1 starter items are designed to be way more powerful than standard items. So that's another thing. There's also no 500 pots as far as I'm aware in Smite 2. I don't really know why. I think there should be. I personally think it should have like different 500 pots for each role. You know, some that give prots, some that give power, some that give attack speed, some that give lifesteal or whatever. I think that would be a cool addition to have like unique 500 pots. And you can kind of buy what you need at the current time or what's good for your role and that kind of stuff. Also, there's no glyphs in Smite 2. You know, in Smite 1, you've got at least an extra probably 600 gold to spend on a glyph in your build. Not every single build has glyphs, but a lot of them do. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of missing from Smite 2. I don't know if they plan to implement it or if they plan to implement some different things that can allow this. But you just kind of feel like, oh, I'm just building my 6 items and I'm kind of done. There's nothing like, you know, extra to do on that. There's no glyphs, there's no pots, there's no starter items at level 20, there's none of that kind of stuff. So it just kind of feel like, you know, once you get to 6 items, there's literally nothing else to do and you can kind of stalemate, as they say here. So some actions that they've taken for this. Jungle buffs now drop at Infamy level 1, giving more to fight over in the early game. So I assume they're still going to scale up in effectiveness as you level up your Infamy, but having them drop at level 1 definitely is interesting. Not that defining a meta really matters right now, but I imagine in Alpha 3 maybe the stats will change to people starting at buffs, because I feel like having your buff is going to be very important for that. Jungle buffs now stack, further encouraging invading and strategically powering up one player with multiple buffs. So I guess you can like get blue and then you can get the enemy blue and you get double the effect. That's pretty powerful. So encouraging invades a little bit. We've seen this a little bit in Smite 1 as well. They're sort of like not fully encouraging invades, but they're leaning a little bit more into it. And already invading in Smite 2 is quite strong because you can deny infamy from the enemy, but now you can also take their buff and stack it on top of yours, so it's going to be even more potential for invades in the early game. Gold Fury, Fire Giant, Structures, and Titans are now all easier to take down and tank. They shouldn't be complete pushovers, but you should feel comfortable taking them on with the numbers advantage. Yeah, this was a big thing in Smite 2. It felt like, especially Gold Fury and Fire Giant were just like ridiculously hard to kill in the mid game. Like, you pretty much had to be at full build, and even then they were a little bit hard, especially to tank. They deal a lot of damage, they have strong anti-heal, and it felt really hard to tank them. It's like oftentimes you pull it, and because it's so hard to kill and because it deals so much damage, your tank ends up getting down to like 30-40% health, and then you can't kill it, you don't have the burst damage, the enemy team comes in, cleans up your tank, and then it's kind of like a reset at that point. A lot of that happened in a lot of the alphas that I played in, at least. Minions and Minotaurs will now scale to become tankier as the game progresses, so minion pushes should be more effective, so they can stay under tower a little bit longer. They won't necessarily get one shot. We are learning from Smite's 9.5 Revert and making a similar change to Smite 2's time to kill, specifically improving early lane fighting and ganking, so they've reduced all the base health on the gods by 25%. They're not going to be doing the protections changes, because Smite 2 already had a lower protection count than Smite 1, and I believe they're using the same protections formula. I think they gave out the formulas in the original alpha patch notes, and I think it's the same. So yeah, this should help as well in terms of making Smite 2 feel a little bit more like Smite 1 is now, which generally I've seen a pretty positive reception to. Next steps, we are discussing adding additional objectives to the map and or adjusting the rewards and timings of objectives currently on the map. Yeah, I think some new stuff is important. I'd say just replace the gold piles with something more interesting for sure. And as I mentioned before, add some kind of side camps to the side jungles, make them actually interesting to play around, because currently the side jungles basically don't exist. There's no point in them being there in the early game, because you're not using the teleporters, and it's just a gold pile that's basically on the side of the lane. It's not really in the side jungle. And also the rotating buff camp near mid feels really uninspired as well, a bit like the gold piles. It feels like something they just kind of slapped in there as a placeholder. I'm not sure if it's intended as placeholder or not, but having something more interesting there would be quite cool. We are evaluating the economy curve of the game. Will likely adjust the speed at which players will obtain items. We would like players to complete their 6th item at about the time they are currently finishing their 5th item. So they want to see you get a little bit more gold, get your items online a little bit faster so you can close out those games. Moving on, the controls for the game on console do not feel good. Controller support on Smite 1 had a lot of features that we did not bring over well for earlier alpha tests. We have made significant effort to improve this for alpha 3, though work still remains. Aiming on console, restricted or otherwise, has specific curves that define how quickly or slowly aiming accelerates. These were way off in the first alphas. They have now been mapped to match directly with Smite 1 and should restore the aiming feel of Smite 1. This will also improve the feel of restricted camera pitch on keyboard and mouse. Who the fuck plays with restricted camera pitch on, dude? Turn that off immediately. We adjusted how characters feel to turn and strafe, which had a much larger impact on console due to the rate and smoothness of turning of the controller. We adjusted the scaling on ground targeters so that it maintains a relative size as it did in Smite 1, making it easier to use. Next steps for console stuff, we need to do a major pass on dead zones and some other defaults that can affect the feel of console aiming, and we need to expose more of these options to players. So yeah, I can't really comment on this. I've never played Smite on controller in my entire life. I can't really comment on this, but if you're a controller made, try out Alpha 3, at least for a couple of games, see how it feels, give them some feedback, see if it's better for you. The new active item system is unfriendly to console keybinds. Smite 2 must play well on console. A large portion of our player base and fans are console players, and Smite 2 exists to serve our fans. Yeah, the console experience is extremely important. I'm a PC player. It doesn't actually matter to me directly, but it matters to me in terms of like how popular the game is going to be and how well it's received. Don't think they've released any numbers on this particularly, but I imagine like at least half the player base for Smite is on consoles between them all, so it's definitely important to get this right. We have tried to balance active and passive items so that active items are not required. One of our goals of this system is that players can opt into the number of buttons they want, and that players can actually play with fewer buttons than Smite 1 and not be at a disadvantage. We continue to adjust default key bindings and test new binds to see what feels good for players and what does not. Smite 2 already features fully remappable keybinds for controllers, which Smite 1 did not support. Insane to me that it didn't support that. That's actually crazy. I think giving players that kind of control will be really important. This should allow for players to find inputs that feel good for them. So yeah, if you're a console player and you find something you like, maybe share it. You know, share it in my Discord, share it on Reddit, share it on Twitter, wherever you want to share it. Give it to people, because it'll be important to find sort of like a decently optimal setting that works for you in terms of getting your active items right. Again, I can't comment too much on this. I'm not a controller player. For the next steps, while remapping bindings are great, we need to find defaults that feel good for the majority of players. Yeah, it's very important. People's first experience with the game is a large part of their total experience with the game. This is something we have missed on, and we are working through some options. Adjusting the input for ranking skills, which would free those easy to execute binds for actives. Yeah, absolutely. Ranking up skills is not particularly important. You don't really need to do it in like a quick, timely manner, especially compared to active items. Like using your actives quickly and easily is much more important than leveling up your abilities quickly and easily. Limiting actives in some form, finding 3 to 4 good bindings is much easier than finding 6, and would still provide a large amount of flexibility and skill expression, which we think is valuable in the new system. Moving on a little bit more on active items in general, not just controller specific stuff. The new active item system is difficult to use, is uninteresting, or isn't a clear improvement from Smite 1. So this is a comment that I've seen a lot on my videos and like Reddit posts about Smite 2. We believe the new active item system will benefit both high level players and casual players of Smite 2 in the long term. Do agree with this. High level players able to use active items at the right moment will find additional avenues for skill expression and high level pro play. This is definitely the main argument for it. New players can opt out of active items, choosing to instead build strong passive items, resulting in a game that is less mechanically complex than Smite 1. So I see this argument a lot from Hi-Rez, and I sort of don't agree with it in a certain way. Like, yes, you can choose to build strong passive items, but the reality is, if active items are strong, there's going to be some that are in the meta builds. And so inherently, I feel like you are going to be gimping yourself by not building any active items. Like, you're probably not gimping yourself if you just stick to like 1 or 2 active items. I think they mention a little bit further down here. Yeah, they do that. Like, a lot of the optimal builds, they probably won't necessarily include like 4, 5, 6 active items. It probably just won't be that way, especially for non-support roles. I think support builds a lot of active items at the moment from what I've seen. But you know, for your junglers or whatever, you might just have like the one that gives you increased attack speed and basic attack damage, or you might just have Bloodforge or whatever. But inherently, I feel like a lot of the meta builds will end up including at least 1 or 2 active items, and if they don't include any active items, then it's a fail system. No one's going to want to use them. And the reality is, like, meta builds aren't just for, like, you know, grandmasters and pro players. Like, the vast majority of people in Smite that play the game seriously, you know, from, like, gold up or whatever, will be trying to use effective builds that are relatively close to meta. And the reality is, like, you know, myself, pro players, all these kind of content creators, they'll be posting videos and build guides and stuff, including active items, because that will be how you play the game best. And so people are going to be sort of forced into using active items if they want to have the best build without gimping themselves and just going for purely passive items. So I don't think this is a great argument. Like, yes, you have the choice to build passive items only if you want to, but you're probably gimping yourself by doing that. Players can slowly ramp up complexity, adding additional active items to their builds over time. Yeah, I do agree with this, though. It's going to take a while to get used to. I'm getting used to it now over the course of a few alphas, and I think once the game goes 24/7 and people can play for like a week straight of like, you know, 4 hours a day or whatever, I think at that point you'll get used to active items very quickly. It's just at the moment we only have access to the game for a very limited time, and you can't really get the practice in that you need to sort of get, you know, using active items into your brain and into your muscle memory. We think the core issue currently is more perception based. Players think that they will need to build a lot of active items, or that we intend them to. We think this is kind of similar to player perception around difficult to play gods. For example, a god like Giannis in Smite 1 may work very well at the SPL level, but will have a very low win rate at all levels. Definitely very true. We expect that builds that include a large number of active items will likely be similar. Strong in the hands of the top 1% of players, but lower win rate because they require strong execution. Once the meta resolves itself, we expect most builds to include 1 to 2 active items, resulting in a similar overall complexity to Smite 1, just ramping up throughout the game. Yeah, I think this is a good place to be, you know. I think like 1 to 2 active items is fairly good. You know, maybe support builds might sometimes include 2 or 3, because a lot of the support ones are quite strong, and, you know, supports in Smite 1, they had these very strong, like, teamfight relics, which are sort of going to be replaced with active items. So supports might be a little bit more heavy on this, but generally I think 1 to 2 active items is a good place to sort of aim the game at, because that's more than manageable. You know, you were managing beads and Aegis in Smite 1, you'll be managing beads and like 1 active item, or beads and 2 active items in Smite 2. I don't think it's that big of an ask. People will get used to it, but I do think this argument up here is a bit dumb, that people can build passive items if they want to. Like, the reality is, if active items are strong enough to be built, they'll be in all the meta builds, they'll be in the content creator videos, they'll be in the pro player builds, and people are going to want to build them. Otherwise, you're just pretty much gimping yourself. So actions taken. Our current active items are balanced generally well towards our goals, but we have room to improve in design, balance, and user experience. We need to better balance actives around unique timings and situations. Currently, there are too many that are just a combat bonus that you want to mash at the same time. We need to design a variety of use cases. This is very important. This isn't something that I thought of or put into these kind of words, but yeah, this is extremely important. It's something I have noticed now that I've read this sentence. Like, a lot of the time, you're going to have like Bloodforge, and you're going to have the attack speed boosting one or whatever, and you're going to have to pop a lot of these items at the exact same time in very similar situations. And that is really where a lot of the mechanical demand comes from. You know, if you just got 1 active item that you want to use in 1 situation, that's all you have to think about. You know, if you have 1 that's going to be useful if you're getting dived in combat, and 1 that's going to be useful for like shredding objectives, or if you're diving in combat, and then you've got 1 that's useful, you know, entirely outside of combat for a different reason or whatever, then you're not thinking about mashing 3 active items all at once really quickly with split-second decision making. You're just thinking about, when do I need to use this 1 active item? So I think that would be very important. We need to create more unique active effects that push the system to feel more different from Smite 1 relics and show what it's capable of achieving. Absolutely. I think there are some very cool ones already in the game, but a lot of them are just Smite 1 relics, or like sort of Smite 1 items redesigned like Bloodforge. We need to continue to improve console controls as noted above. Moving on though, the new item shop is difficult to navigate and find what to buy. The current item store is the most complicated view that we have planned for the item store. We prioritized this in early development as we believed it was the format that hyper-veteran players would be the most likely to use, but we understand that this view is not great for a first impression to players trying to understand the new store. Okay, that's interesting to hear. I don't think they've said this before, so like the current store implementation is really meant for like the veterans that are coming into the alpha, and they will have a more simplified store layout for when they go sort of more free to play. Actions taken. Roll tabs have been added for each god. These are very useful. We saw this in Alpha 2, I believe. That's very handy for just like people that don't really know particularly what they want to build. They can just click on a roll tab and just be like, okay, I'll just buy 6 items from here and it'll probably be okay. Within these roles, there are subcategories to ease navigation and learn what items do. We have added consumables to the roll tab so you can buy a complete build from within 1 tab. We have made a number of improvements to the controller item shop navigation. Yeah, this was a big thing in Alpha 1, so good to see that. We have added support for 3 separate views of the item store. So yeah, we saw this in Alpha 2 as well. They've got like the sort of 2-sided store that's more like the console one. They've got the big central store and then the left-sided store as well. For the next steps, we have many minor improvements planned to navigation and flow of the current store, especially for controllers. We intend to build a guided store system which will represent players with a few recommended items at a time for each item slot, helping players navigate their way through a build. Yeah, I believe Predecessor has a similar system where you get given like 3 recommended items that you might want at that point in your build, and you can kind of like pick one. I think that's very useful for helping new players understand what they're building and why. Moving on though, the new strength and intelligence split is confusing and or isn't an improvement from Smite 1. Another common complaint that I've seen and completely disagree with. As a whole, we believe strength and intelligence have gone well so far. This lets us now have a unified item store for all gods and creates unique balancing opportunities. We can now support multiple playstyles in a single kit. Yeah, that's the big interesting part of it, I feel like. That said, we think there are some core issues with the system as currently implemented which led to this feedback. Actions taken. There are no changes to the system for the upcoming Alpha weekend, but adjustments should be made ahead of the following test. So for Alpha 3, it's going to be business as usual. Strength feels physical and intelligence feels magical, even though they are currently unrelated. It's learnable, but it's not intuitive. Strength should mean I get physically stronger, right? We are looking at renaming strength and intelligence to more clearly denote them as a scaling stat with words that are less coupled to physical and magical. Yeah, I think this is good for like clarity reasons, absolutely. Personally, I'm just throwing this idea out there. It might not work, it might be terrible, but I just had it like a few days ago and I thought I'd throw it out there. What if they added dexterity as well? You know, what if you had strength, intelligence, and dexterity, and you had some like assassins that would scale a lot more off of dexterity, hunters would have strong dexterity scaling as well, and then you've got got, you know, like assassins and hunters might have a little bit of mixed strength scaling, but strength scaling will be a lot reserved for warriors and some guardians. I'm using the Smite 1 class terms, obviously, just to kind of clarify what I'm talking about. These don't exist in Smite 2. And then you would have intelligence, mostly for your mages, for some of your more like magical, like enchanter style guardians, and then maybe a little bit for some hunters like Neath and stuff like that as well. You know, I think it could be cool. Maybe that's a little bit too much to manage for the game. It probably won't be a good idea, but that's just like a little weird idea that I had a few days ago. It's currently not easy to understand what type of damage is being done, either by your own abilities or by an enemy. We want to improve tooltip legibility, making it easier to see damage type as a distinct element. Currently, they share coloration regardless of damage type. We are discussing making gods deal only one type of damage. While there is a strategic depth to mixed damage, the actual impact is low while the potential for confusion is high. It's easier to understand that Chak always does physical damage, but that one ability scales off of stat 1 and ability 3 scales off of stat 2, without also needing to remember the different damage type, which is often different. Yeah, this is something I've come round to a little bit over time. I originally was really against this. I think that, like, you know, having mixed damage types in kits makes the game more interesting. And I think at a high level of gameplay, which is generally where I play at, and, you know, watching the Pro League and all that kind of stuff, I think this will be beneficial. But I think for casual players, it is really confusing. And I don't think the game would lose that much depth by making, you know, gods only do physical or only do magical. I'm not necessarily opposed to this. If anyone at Hi-Rez is watching, I think this could be a good change, and at least maybe something they could try. Depending on the speed they could implement it at, you know, I know that the speed of implementing things is a lot quicker in Smite 2, but I don't know if they would just be able to sort of make this change for a couple of alpha tests, see if it works, and then revert it easily. I'm not sure how easy that would be to do. But if it is relatively easy to do, I think this will be worth a try, because I think this might honestly help a lot with people's confusion in terms of, like, you know, what kind of defense they need to build and stuff like that. Yeah, I'm not necessarily opposed to this. I think the system at the moment is fine. I don't think this system is necessarily better, but it will definitely be better for new players in terms of understanding the game a little bit easier. We hear feedback that some players want most gods to have multiple scaling factors. However, we don't want every god to be forced into this system. We see it as a tool to use where appropriate. Yeah, I don't think every god has to have multiple scaling factors. You know, Kukulkan being an entirely intelligence-based mage is absolutely fine in my opinion. Neath gaining true flexibility as a caster is an example of where the system shines best and doesn't feel forced for little gain. Bacchus having a single ability change to strength did allow us to curb his overall damage and CC in full intelligence builds, but was not a successful application of the system in our book. As we go forward, we will adjust cases where this did not add depth where we wanted it and ensure it is more clear and beneficial. Yeah, I think this is something that will take a lot of time. There are some great examples. I think Neath is a good example, as they mentioned here. I think Zeus is a good example. I think Chak and Odin are relatively good examples as well. But yeah, there are some, like Anubis' Rap being strength-based and dealing physical damage. Why? That doesn't add any depth to the character. You're not going to change your builds based on it. It's just kind of silly. Bacchus' jump as well is a little bit of a similar case. I think you need to lean fully into them being hybrid and interesting, or you just make them entirely one. It's fine for the sum to be entirely one. Moving on though, the pace of new content is slow. Will there be enough content when this game is 24/7? I'm not going to read this just now. The answer is no. There will not be enough content when the game goes 24/7 if it's going to come out in 2 months. Absolutely not. It will still feel like an alpha that you're probably not going to be playing all the time, I would imagine. We've learned a lot about our internal pipeline for bringing gods to Smite 2 over the past few months. Some things have taken longer than expected, and we needed to address those bottlenecks. Yeah, they did promise, well, they didn't promise, but they said that they were planning to bring a god over from Smite 1 roughly every 2 weeks. And the pace of those have seemingly not really been there at the moment. I feel like the pace was definitely intended to be faster in terms of adding new gods from Smite 1. This has led to some delays, such as only shipping 2 new ported gods for the second alpha, but we feel like we have the pipeline in a much better state going forward. Okay, so maybe we'll start to see, you know, 3 gods being added per alpha or something. Then again, we probably only got a couple more closed alphas by the time we go into, you know, 24/7 closed alpha. Actions taken. We have significantly scaled up the design team, allowing us to rapidly add new items, game modes, and gods. We have adjusted our pipeline to allow us to port gods with gameplay updates at a good pace while also working on new gods. Yeah, hopefully with this larger design team, they'll be able to throw in some more interesting things. I think some gods have been absolute hits going into Smite 2, and they're so massively improved. Neath is a good example, Zeus is a good example, Hades is one of the best examples, but a lot of them feel like they just play the exact same, and maybe they have a little bit of mixed scaling elements, but they just play the exact same. You know, like Chak, for example, like Bellona, like Anher, like where nothing really changed. So I think some more interesting changes as we get some of the more complex gods coming in from Smite 1 could be really cool. Next steps. Our intent is to ship 3 ported gods in each 24/7 alpha update, releasing weekly within that update. Example, in a 4-week update, a new god will release during each of the first 3 weeks. So a new god every week. Not necessarily every week, because then they'll have a week off before they go to the next update. But yeah, once an update launches, there'll be a new god every 3 weeks. That's definitely an improvement. I mean, that's a little bit faster than what they said initially. They said 1 god every 2 weeks, so that's really good to see. We will also be shipping all new gods like Hecate every few months. They said 2 months originally. I don't know if that's still going to be the same. You will still see a few alpha weekends where we have fewer than 3 ported gods, as our development pipeline takes months. It takes us a while to get caught up. From a raw feature standpoint, 24/7 alpha is currently scheduled to include Arena, Ranked Conquest, Ascension passes and God Mastery progression and rewards, voice chat, a lot more, which is subject to change as your feedback comes in. So there you go. If you were looking for Arena, they did say they were working on it and it was pretty close to finished. Presumably that is going to be coming for 24/7 alpha at the end of August. Maybe it will also be there for like Alpha 4 potentially. I don't think they've announced it for Alpha 3, but maybe it'll be there for like Alpha 4 or like one of the alpha tests before it goes into 24/7 alpha. Rank should be cool. Ascension passes and God Mastery is very important. As I mentioned earlier on in this video, it's important to get that progression in once you go 24/7 because that's what's going to keep people playing the game and not just going back to Smite 1 where they can earn all of this stuff. Voice chat is whatever. No one uses voice chat in Smite 1 anyway. And then a bunch more stuff as well. Moving on to our final bullet point for this post though. It's been a very long one. I've been recording for 38 minutes right now. The video probably won't quite be 38 minutes because I'll have to cut some stuff out. But yeah, it's been a very long blog post. So very insightful. I think there's a lot of good stuff here. Combat clarity is poor and it's difficult to read what is going on in a fight. This is definitely a feeling that I've had generally in the alphas. This is a really hard one to put a finger on like why it feels bad. Unreal Engine 5 is an amazing tool, but sometimes we can push too far and add too much visual or audio noise. I guess noise is a good way to describe it. Yeah, it feels like too much is going on sometimes. Smite 1's technical limitations enforce simpler shapes, colors, and sounds. We want to make sure we're using UE5's power but retaining clarity, ideally using these new tools to make combat even clearer than Smite 1. We're not there yet. Actions taken. Tools like dynamic scaling of particles where many gods are fighting and selectively adjusting the opacity of self, enemy, and friendly VFX have been created. That's really cool. So, you know, if too much is going on, they can just dynamically scale down the particles. This is really cool. I imagine this is something they couldn't do in UE3. Thanatos, Hecate, and the Morrigan were created with many of these lessons learned. Their VFX and SFX should be a lot more clear as a whole, so we'll see if these gods specifically feel much better, and then maybe those kind of changes will be brought to other gods. Audio mixing has been undergoing a major overhaul to ensure that sounds that need to be loud and heard are loud and heard, while subtle or more flavorful sounds yield to bigger gameplay cues. So yeah, dynamic audio mixing as well is, I'm not sure if that is something that they could do in UE3 or not, but yeah, you want to make sure that like, you know, certain abilities, like ability effects and stuff is playing much louder than other things. We recently made a minor adjustment to our color space and lighting. This will make the clarity worse in the short term, but should be a good step towards a foundation of more clarity. And the next steps. Begin tuning VFX to be clear in the new color space and lighting that they just implemented. Fully implementing these dynamic VFX tools to aid in combat readability, and the audio mixing pass has a long way to go, so expect more of this in upcoming alpha tests. So in conclusion, that's a lot. It was, absolutely, but I'm glad they made this post. It was very insightful. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this as well. But hopefully you can see that we are listening and working every day to improve Smite 2 based on your feedback. Thank you so much for all the feedback you've given so far. We'll be sharing more on these changes Wednesday, June 26th in the Alpha Showcase stream over on Twitch, along with the accompanying patch notes. Be sure to subscribe to my channel if you want to catch my take on those and my overview of them. We hope to see you in the next Alpha test and when we enter 24/7 Alpha on August 27th. So yeah, there you go. A bit of a long video, but those of you that stuck around, hopefully this was interesting for you. Those of you that just read the TLDR, you're not here anymore, so hopefully enjoy the rest of your day. But yeah, I think that was a good read personally. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, and I will catch you guys for probably the patch notes that will be coming out in a couple of days from now. Oh, actually tomorrow. I lied. Yeah, those will be coming out tomorrow. So that should be pretty cool, and I will catch you guys tomorrow for another one on this channel. Peace out, you nerds.